Welcome everybody to another Deckbox Top 10. I'm Aaron Hernandez. With me this week we have Anthony Gestes again, and with us for the first time we have Matt Baetzhold. Matt, welcome.
Hello.
Matt's here today to help us talk about Pauper. Matt plays a lot of Pauper. You got a lot of decks built, and we're going to be talking about the top 10 Pauper decks. Are you excited, Matt?
Always, absolutely. We're talking Magic.
Do you have all of these decks built?
No. But I have most of them built.
Okay, cool.
And the ones that I don't have built, I have the cards. They're just being used elsewhere.
It's when you have that many Pauper decks going, it's hard to keep everything together.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you guys, what I really learned putting together this list is that Pauper has changed a lot in the last 2 years. About 2 years ago, I played a fair amount of Pauper, and when I was doing the research to get this list done, I realized just how much things have changed. There have been bannings. There's been a ton of new cards printed from the Master set. So I'm really excited to ask you guys some questions because I know you both know more about Pauper than I do, and we're going to talk about some sweet Pauper decks. It's one of the funnest formats to build in and to play in just because you can do so many different things.
And it's great for the kids because they can afford it.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. Great way to get just anybody who's budget conscious into Magic, start them with Pauper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's get it started, guys. At number 10, we have Infect, one of the most hated strategies of all time. Pretty basic package.
Yeah, regardless of the format, 10 is way less than 20 or 40, depending on Commander or constructed 60-card formats. And assembling that 10 damage is not that hard, especially with cards like Glistener Elf being a 1/1 on turn 1. Get that Infect in there early, mutagenic growths, groundswells, tons of pump spells are common.
That's one thing that I think kind of holds Infect together in the Pauper format is it's just the nature of pump spells.
Yep.
Are inherently going to be printed at common, so you get a lot of really good pump spells, and the Infect creatures have been pretty set in stone.
Absolutely.
For a while.
You have all the hits that you need for your Infect deck. If you think about like a modern Infect deck, most of those cards that show up are there, and we're doing Pauper, so you can go into the legacy cards.
And you still get Gataxian Probe.
And yeah, I always love saying that about Pauper. It's like, yeah, we still have Probe. It's not restricted.
Yep. You can really do some powerful things in Pauper that you can't do elsewhere, and that's one of them. Number 9, we have another kind of blitz deck, albeit in different colors. We have Kiln Fiend.
So this deck's red-blue based. Kiln Fiend gets +3/+0 whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, so its power gets up there real quick, especially when you still have access to Gataxian Probe and other real cheap and efficient spells.
Yeah.
And this kind of shortcuts the 20 life by using cards like Temur Battle Rage to give its Kiln Fiend double strike or its Nivik Cyclops double strike to get that damage a little quicker.
Not to mention you're just basically doubling every bolt you cast.
Absolutely. 3 damage extra on your power with your Kiln Fiend.
And you get access to all the good blue cards that you wouldn't be able to play in Modern. I'd never turn down a chance to ponder.
We just mentioned it earlier of cards coming into the format. Kiln Fiend can absolutely play Gush, which means they can absolutely play, and we'll talk about this more later, Foil.
I think we should take a second to talk about this right now. One of the biggest changes to the Pauper format is from Ultimate Masters, they printed foil at common. Gush has always been a staple in the format. Especially decks, really any deck that wants to put down permanents early and then protect them. You were probably already playing Gush.
Yeah, basically, if you could play an island, you played Gush. It's just an easy card. It's free. You can eventually cast it for 5 if you really wanted to, for fun. But basically, Gush is just going to be a free draw spell that just accelerates whatever you're trying to do.
Yep, and just paying the alternate cost of Gush, picking up your islands, and then discarding them to foil, all while you're beating them down with a Delver, or in this case, a Kiln Fiend. It's just really good value, and it's going to be really hard to beat.
Historically, the way Magic has been broken is through the abuse of free mana. And adding foil to this format gives us a whole other way to exploit free mana.
Just pairing those 2 free spells together is going to be really powerful. Unless it gets banned at some point. We'll see.
Maybe. It's possible. It's a problem.
Yeah. So moving right along, we have elves. Much different strategy than our previous two.
Does not play Gush.
Does not play Gush.
Does not play Gush at all. And this is one of the first decks that we'll see a little bit of a trend that is kind of closer to the legacy version of itself than the modern version, because you get access to a lot more powerful stuff.
Yeah, Priest of Titania, any of those, just hyper ramp cards and elves. You're also getting your Birchlow Rangers, which is going to be color fixing, so you'll see people splash in the distant melodies to just draw a bunch of cards.
Yep.
So they don't play Gush, but they draw more when they have a board full of elves.
Yep. You also have things like Well-Wisher to keep you alive, and you just overload their bolts. You just put so many permanents in play and have so much mana. You just overwhelm people.
Oh, and Turn Timber Ranger, I think, is the card.
The X1, the +X+X.
Yeah.
Timberwatch Elf.
Timberwatch Elf, thank you. Timberwatch Elf. Yeah, that turns any one of your elves into essentially a lethal elf.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. So you also have to watch out for those precision strikes coming from elves occasionally as well.
And to talk about things that came in the last 2 years-ish, you have Lissalana Huntmaster, which is put down a common that's just going to expand your board for every elf that you cast.
All of the tokens.
Is it Birchlow Rangers that's the baby Heritage Druid?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
You tap 2 elves to get you, but it's a man of any color, whereas Heritage Druid only made you green. So it's one of the variances that you're not going to see in modern elves, because Birchlow Rangers is not modern legal, but in Pauper, you're getting into the legacy layer, and you can cast spells of other colors.
Well, it just combos so well with Lysolana Huntmaster,
Yeah.
because any elf you cast then immediately taps with its the token to make a mana. Just obviously a lot of synergy in elves.
Yeah.
One of the classic tribes.
Far more explosive than the modern version.
Much more frustrating to play against is number 7, Boggles.
How about that removal you got there? Oh, no.
No. Hexproof is one of the most loved and hated keyword mechanics that we've gotten in the last 10 years, and this deck definitely abuses it.
Yep.
Boggles historically has just enchantments that do ridiculous things, and in Pauper, you have access to some enchantments that even more so. So you already have your... What's the white one?
The Spirit Link? Or...
No. The white one. The armor.
Ethereal
armor. Wow. We got there, folks. Ethereal armor, which is going to give things +1 per enchantment.
Absolutely.
But there's a green version of that gives it +2.
It's
Ancestral Mask.
Ancestral Mask.
Absolutely.
And those 2 cards in combination, anything is lethal within a turn or 2.
Yep. And you also still get Rancor to provide the trample for all of that power.
Do you normally play Heliod the Pilgrim? Right? Am I remember?
There's a few,
tutor
2
card?
to 3 you have to go get the enchantment that you want or need for the situation that you want. But in Pauper, the fact that you can give a creature a permanent boost, because people are going to try and destroy your enchantments, but if your creature stays bigger afterwards, gives you a little bit more flexibility against the infect ways of killing your creatures. So, Boggles is resilient and...
Going back to our decks that are very similar to the legacy versions, we have Burn. Lava Spike's good in every format.
Absolutely, and they just got a new Lava Spike in Skewer the Critics, on top of the ability to play Fire Blast and several other legacy burn spells like Chain Lightning. The power level of this deck is just increased exponentially in the last couple of sets.
Well, it is one of those decks that has such a focused theme that they will just continually print things that make it just a little bit better.
Yeah.
Anything that does damage or any red card that does X damage for 1 or 2 mana, they're going to take a look at. And Wizards is always going to be trying to do new, interesting things with different cards. So you're going to get new, interesting cards like Thermo Alchemist and Skewer the Critics.
Absolutely.
Both of which are great in the deck.
Yeah.
And combo very well together.
Yeah, the creature suite running in Burn, you have Thermal Alchemist, as you mentioned, and also Firebrand Archer, which has sort of vacillated in the past couple of months since we had Skewer the Critic come in. Okay. But just those 2 creatures came in the last year or 2.
Yeah, Hour of Devastation and Eldritch Moon?
Yeah.
Yep, sounds right.
So recent additions just making the Pauper Burn list just that much more consistent and fast.
The another classic strategy at number 5, we have Affinity artifacts, also known as ATOG. I've always been very much fonder of the Pauper affinity list than the modern one.
Someone likes to eat their lands.
They're very different decks. Love playing with the artifact lands.
Absolutely.
Love getting to actually play the Metalcraft cards. It's just a little bit slower and feels a little bit fairer, but not too fair at the same time compared to the modern deck, I guess.
Well, the modern deck doesn't really play affinity cards.
Not anymore.
It doesn't. I don't call my robots affinity because they don't like artifacts.
There's no.
They're just happy.
But this
There's
deck
no
you
cost
still
reduction.
you still get to play Frogmite, which is
a free
one of the best.
Oh.
One of the best things to do in Magic is play a 0-mana 2. Okay, maybe it's not one of the best things in Magic, but it's pretty good to play a 0-mana 2.
Let's be fair. In context, when you get to eat it with your ATOG, and then the rest of the lands that you've already tapped for mana to cast your Team or Battle Rage, or your Fling, or whatever you needed to do to win the game in that spot, cross your fingers, hope they don't have foil.
Yeah,
that is actually definitely a thing for the eight, especially the more all in you are on the ATOG plan.
Absolutely.
The more the printing of foil hurts you.
Well, something that I learned in this research is that there's a more combo version of the ATOG affinity deck that kind of would get around that sort of foil aspect using Disciple of the Vault to trigger those additional points of life loss.
It keeps that residual damage going through. Keeps it's pressure on a different axis, which is what I love about the modern affinity lists. Is it's not just one direction. You have the go wide strategy, which can easily become the pierce strategy. In Pauper, your affinity lists do that with very specific spells. So your Disciple is going to be that go wide, kind of get them that way. You could also just run out all of your free creatures and attack.
Yep.
And then when all else fails, you have ATOG.
ATOG's always there to get your back.
So the next deck on our list is one that I had heard of in passing but didn't really understand. Matt, tell me about Inside Out.
So Inside Out is a combo deck, probably I would say the most focused on combo deck in Pauper. There's a few others that we should probably mention, but as far as if you're looking to look for a combo deck representative of the format, it's the Inside Out combo.
So what's the combo?
So you have the card Inside Out, which is a blue-red hybrid, and it's going to switch the power and toughness of a creature.
Okay, so we're trying to acquire a bunch of toughness.
Yes, and you're going to do that with Tireless Tribe.
Okay. All right.
It's an 0/4, 1/4, some ridiculous amount of toughness with very little power.
And how do we get more power?
You're just going to throw out all sorts of different cantrip effects and discard them. So the ability of it is you can discard cards to Tireless Tribe to give it additional toughness.
Okay.
And you do that, and the way the stacking works is sort of complicated, but basically every single thing that you do to make its toughness larger, no matter when you've cast your Inside Out, is actually going to boost its power. Because the effect of the spell Inside Out is put on the layer after all of those other effects are accounted for.
Okay. So regardless of when we discard the cards, we get the power bonus.
Yeah.
We discard a bunch of cards, and we attack with just a big, a huge toughness
thing that you
Tireless
probably
Tribe?
can't block because of Slip Through Space or whatever one of those.
Well, and that's the other thing that kind of brings it all together, right? Is you have a bunch of unblockable effects.
Right, exactly.
So
yeah, you're just
pretty
kind of sneaking
straightforward,
it through.
pretty neat.
And it's got to come up again. You have this deck has always played Gush, and now this deck plays Foil.
Well, and I was going to say that this deck, for a combo deck, is surprisingly resilient to those because, one, you play a lot of cantrips and things like that, but because it's an activated ability on your creature. Once it's in play, there's less to interact with.
And there's one other key card to talk about, and that's Circular Logic.
Oh, Circular Logic.
It's Counterspell for Madness.
Absolutely.
So when you discard your Circular Logic to protect or make your Tireless Tribe bigger, you can then counter whatever removal spell that they were trying to throw at your Tireless Tribe. So that in combination with Foil and Gush and all these other redundant things just makes it a combo deck that you cannot really fight. When it's especially if anybody knows how to beat Infect in Modern, do not fight when they're attacking you.
No.
Don't do it. That's how you die.
Yep.
Makes sense.
You
It
fight
just
it-
keeps discarding. Well, in Infect, they keep casting pump spells.
Right.
And killing
Yeah.
them.
I don't care what your card says. It's not an instant anymore. It's a sorcery. Don't cast it on your opponent's turn.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Down to the last two of the biggest staples of the format. I'm
Done the last three. We're on the podium at this point.
Excuse me. I wanted to leave out Boros Monarch, which is another deck, built around new cards. The Monarch mechanic coming out of Conspiracy 2, I believe. When I looked at what was the name of that card again? Palace Attendants.
Palace Sentinel.
Palace Sentinel. When I looked at it's just a 2/4 that makes you the Monarch, and I'll be honest, I did not think that it was going to be a card that saw play and constructed, but it really makes a lot more sense when you look at the deck. The synergy with Core Skyfisher is really strong.
You're also playing a bunch of like prophetic prisms and alchemist vials that you can abuse with your core skyfishers to just kind of keep grinding that advantage.
It's almost mid-rangey.
It feels very
It very much is the Enneagram mid-range deck of Pauper. And there's a couple variants of it too. You can go the tokens route, which is still very much a mid-range list, but it can go wide, running things like Battle Screech to generate a large board. Sacred Cat has become a go-to card in these lists, just because it's a recurring thing that has lifelink that gives you play against burn. Especially, as good as burn is in Pauper, you need some manner of gaining life or fog effect or whatever. Boros Monarch does that just by flooding the board. Palace Sentinels gets in the way of everything and draws you extra gas.
Yep, that 4th toughness, very relevant.
Absolutely.
Very hard to kill. So now that we are back to where I was a second ago, let's talk about the top two
From the future.
staples of the format. Number 2, we have Tron. Now, the last time I was playing Pauper, I was playing blue-black Dinrova Flicker that was built around, that was very much a control deck.
Yeah.
And this is what that deck has turned into.
In a lot of ways. So, just like Modern has its Mono Green Tron, you can do Mono Green Tron in Pauper. It's more of a mid-range grindy deck. You have Fangren Marauders to just gain a bunch of life to fight against the artifacts and that sort of stuff. You have the Dimir Dinrovatron, which is probably one of the more known ways of just finishing out a game, and with Ghostly Flicker combo. And what I like to do is just play all the colors.
Every one of them. That's my favorite way to play this Paupertron deck as well. You just get access to so many different tools. Prophetic Prism filters your mana. Access to any color.
Pulse Marasa. We were talking just a second ago about having game against Bird, which is something that Pulse definitely helps with. You can Teachings for it.
Yeah, it's an instant, so you can cast your mystical teachings
for that, and then you get back your Mole Drifter that you threw away with Evoke turns for earlier, and then you cast it, and you're drawing all the cards.
And then you draw
that's probably my favorite thing about the Flicker versions of these decks is really when you get it's a soft lock is what we were talking about. There are a bunch of soft locks where you're getting back your Ghostly Flicker and then doing something else. And depending on what position you're in, whatever that something else is changes a little bit. Maybe you're blinking a Stonehorn Dignitary. Maybe we're drawing cards with our Seagate Oracle. But then eventually we're going to find our Dinrova Horror and we're going to put all your lands back in your hand and make you discard them. Winning the game when my opponent has no permanents in play is my favorite way to win the game.
And especially when you can do that by wrathing them one permanent a turn. Although, let's be fair, Ghostly Flickering, you're probably doing that a few times a turn.
Well, that's the point of the Tron lands. It is giving you the mana to really establish this lock. Being able to do it once or twice is good, but that was the problem with the blue-black deck. You had to. It took too much time to get the mana in play to really get things going, and that's why Tron kind of puts it over the top.
And you might say, though, well, we're drawing all these cards. What about milling ourselves? And I bring this up because new iterations to Pauper, Devious Cover-Up. In the last standard set that came out is a great counterspell for this deck. 4 mana is nothing for Paupertron.
Nope.
Interesting.
And you get to put 4 cards back into your library.
Absolutely.
And continue the trend. You buy that card back with your mnemonic wall, and you just Keep going.
So you now can't deck in Denrovatron.
Yeah, sorry, the Spectre of Mill does not scare Tron.
Nope. No, not anymore at least.
Not anymore. It's not going to happen.
It's just a ton of new cards.
Although, Persistent Petitioners does conspicuously get rid of 12 cards if they have 4. I don't know how the math works out for Tron.
Oh no. Oh no. We'll just cover that up.
So moving on from Mel. The number one, what most people think of as like the Pauper deck is Delver. And there are 3 main variations of Delver. You have blue-red, blue-black, and mono-blue.
Yep. Blue-black being the newest kind of iteration to the top-tier power level.
Getting access to foil.
So Matt, walk us through the difference, the big differences between the 3. Why are we playing red cards?
So let's start with mono blue.
Okay.
Because that's kind of like the foundation. So mono blue gives you access to your Mole Drifters, your Delver of Secrets, which is the namesake, but you're also getting your Spire Golems, which has affinity for islands. Okay. Free spells are always great. Pauper has plenty of free spells.
Yep.
You can still play Gitaxian Druid. And being able to bounce back a free spell with Ninja the Deep Hours and recast it and continue, just unbeatable card advantage almost. In general, your mono blue Delver deck is a tempo list. You're doing Spellstutter Sprites and Fairy Miscreant.
Yes, Fairy Miscreant.
Draw additional cards when you control different Fairy Miscreants, and you can, again, bounce those because they're not going to get blocked because they're flyers with your Ninja the Deep Powers, and just kind of keep that cycle going and build this generation and bounce your opponent's stuff with Vapor Snag and just kind of plink away at them and use your Repeatable to just finish the game out.
Very, very tempo.
Yeah. The most tempo oriented.
Right. So
kind of where that phrase kind of comes from. Right?
Yeah. So the next one to go into would be the red lists, and it's not truly red, it's snow covered.
It is snow covered.
Because you get Skred.
Which is not quite Swords to Plowshares, but it's close.
It's basically Swords to Plowshares.
It's real close.
Do I want to say it's better? Because
the exile.
They don't gain life. Their creature is dead.
Yeah, the exile.
I mean, they can pulse of Murasa, whatever you scredded.
Fair, yeah.
But there's the life gain. I don't know.
But that's only if we're talking Tron.
That is...
Tron's only one deck on this list.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Bogles doesn't really help you, but any of that other stuff, that Skred's going to take care of whatever you need to deal with.
Yep. Kills even things as big as Denrovahor. We were talking earlier about the value of having the 4th toughness. And Skred is one of the that's one of the reasons to play Skred. Is because you don't care about that toughness anymore.
Yeah. So blue-red Delver was my Delver shell of choice, and you just don't really understand the power of Skred until you Skred an Ulamog's Crusher.
It does feel pretty good. It is pretty hard to beat Eldrazi with commons, and
being able to just 8 damage.
One mana for 8 damage is really efficient. Yeah, it is really efficient.
Really
so you played blue-red Delver. Have you played blue-black?
I have not. I actually have not really had the chance to play much Pauper since Foil has printed, and I kind of feel like the blue-black version and being able to access Foil a lot easier is probably the evolution that the deck needs to take.
I mean, that seems like it's going to be probably the best home for it.
And just that tempo. Free spells are great in tempo decks.
Presently, if you look at the folks talking, Color Commentary is an awesome podcast to check out. Alex Ullman does a lot of Pauper content. A lot of people are up in arms talking about what's going to be banned and something needs to be done. Definitely Gush is number one in that conversation.
Taking Gush out instead of Foil, huh?
Well, that's the debate, right? What card is the problem? If you were going to ask me my opinion, I think Foil is a neat tool for Pauper. Gush makes it.
I mean, Gush is higher power level, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So it's and seems a little more ubiquitous, right? Like all these decks were playing Gush beforehand.
Right. Gush was the namesake of the format, just like Delver is. So you get into the discussion of Legacy plays Brainstorm, and that's just it's degenerate, but it's known.
Well, I don't think it is quite as identified as Brainstorm is with Legacy.
Fair.
As because I mean, look at all these decks that we talked about today,
Mm-hmm.
and then and these are just the tops. These are the things that we thought were the most powerful. There's all kinds of interesting and neat things that you could be doing.
And let's be fair, like 6 of these decks are Delver. Or 3 of these decks are Delver. Then there's a few others that are Inside Out and Kiln Fiend that run Gush.
Yeah, we've got about
So-
4 different decks on this list, unless we break down the Delvers into. Then we got like 7 on this list that all run Gush.
Yeah, well, and I think really that this kind of sums up why Delver is number 1, and that is because the blue commons are crazy good.
Ponder.
They've always been crazy good. They remain crazy good. You can do a ton of neat things in Pauper, but it turns out that Ponder and Preordain and Gush and Delver of Secrets are always going to hold up.
Are there any non-blue common or uncommons banned in Modern?
Yeah.
The
Preordain?
Non-blue.
Non-blue.
non-blue,
Non-blue
common or
uncommons.
banned in Modern.
Are there any?
They're talking about Faithless Looting.
That's the bluest red card I've ever seen. In Odyssey, there was a card called Careful Study.
Yeah,
That is Faithless Looting without
Nice.
flashback.
Yeah.
It's Faithless Looting's a blue card.
Well, guys, I think that this has been a great discussion about how much we all love blue cards.
Absolutely.
And you really can't go wrong with any of these decks, but you really probably should play blue. Get out there, play Gush, play Foil before they get the Banhammer. They're common, so they're not that expensive. It doesn't matter. And you can just take them out of your out of your Delver deck. That deck will still be good.
Absolutely.
Anthony, Matt, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Once again, I'm Aaron Hernandez, and this has been another Deckbox Top 10.